reflection there. I don't know exactly where the reflection is from everybody. I'm just, you know what, I'm not in a good situation to begin with my online language drawing session because the light is not as such affordable. That's not it's not good to have a nice presentation as it's expected to show everybody. Anyways, I will try my best to present the kind of grammar lesson that I have for today. So hopefully we'll have a nice time spending together talking about the grammar lesson that I came up with this concept. Today we are going to look at the kind of grammar teaching approach which is commonly used by Ethiopian teachers, right? So, truly speaking, honestly speaking, there are two kinds of grammar teaching approaches based on the point of view of the experts, and the one is, you know what, the deductive way of grammar teaching, and the other one is the inductive way of grammar teaching approach. So we are going to look at how these approaches of grammar teaching are going to be different while we are trying to deliver the grammar lesson. We already plan to do so practically in the classroom where we are teaching everybody. So that is the thing that we're going to do right away, right? So I just, have some points that I would like to forward to you so far. The way how we can how we can use grammar for making your communication better, right? You know what? There are things that we have to put in the mind the way how grammar is, going to be delivered as it's expected, as it's planned, right? So basically, as I have mentioned from the very beginning of our discussion, you know what? Basically, there are two approaches of grammar teaching, and the one is the deductive, that basically based on the rule itself, but the inductive is not. So a deductive way of grammar teaching basically focused on the rule. It's rule first kind of grammar teaching. You know, the teacher tried to deliver the rule from the very beginning of the lesson, and the students then try to construct examples by using the grammar lesson they already learned it before. They already learned from the beginning of their lesson, right? So that kind of grammar teaching approach is not as such, practical because provide thing to make our communication better, right? That's why. So the one that makes it different is that, truly speaking, grammar plays its part to make our communication better, right? To have, an effective way of communication. We teachers are strongly expected to use a grammar lesson in the classroom in a very communicative way, because unless we do that, students, may not be in a way to try their best the way how they can get closer to fluency, right? So the kind of approach that we are practically using in the classroom is the one that affects how our communication is going to be good or bad. That affects more. It has an impact. So the way the approach that we are using in the classroom is the one that affects the students, level of learning competency. It has a direct impact on it, right? It has a direct impact. How the students are going to be interactive in the classroom. So we teachers to have a big responsibility to do our bit, the way how we can make the students to be practical, communicative. Unless we do that, the grammar lesson that we take there in the classroom brings nothing on the students, speaking competency. It brings nothing on the students' communication ability, right? That's why we must be systematic. We have to deliver, the grammar lesson to the students in an inductive way. You know what an inductive grammar teaching is about, right? We'll try to talk about it in detail after we completed about the deductive way of grammar teaching, right? So it basically is focused on the rule first, and then the students might be allowed to construct their own sentence based on the information they got there in the beginning of the lesson, right? So the rule is the one that is intentionally given to the students from the very beginning of their lesson, right? So that's the point. So that's what a didactic with grammar teaching approach is all about. It's basically focused on the rule. that kind of grammar teaching approach doesn't let the students to be practical, to be communicating, because you know what, they basically focused on the rule of the grammar, but that doesn't create an opportunity for the students to be much interactive, to be much communicative. That's why. So the way we deliver the grammar in the classroom is the one that affects our teaching learning process practically there in the classroom, right? So we have to have an inductive way of grammar teaching, because in an inductive way of grammar teaching, example, what priority is given for constructing sentences from the beginning of the lesson, right? That's example first. That's the thing that makes it different from the deductive one, right? Example. Priority was given for constructing examples, for constructing sentence, right? And then they are going to discover what the rule is all about, right? They are going to discover, they are going to find out the structure, they are going to find out the pattern of the grammar they learned, right? So from the very beginning, you know what? The teacher might write, some sentence there on the board, and the students are going to use those sentences for their practical conversation, for practical communication in the classroom, and then they are going to find out, discover rules from the examples they basically used for in their communication, right? That's what inductive grammar teaching approach is all about, right? It basically focus on constructing sentences. It basically focus on using those sentences for their conversation in the classroom, right? That's the point. So when you just come to talk about the deductive one, it basically focus on the rule. And after the students learn the rule, the rule of the grammar, what they are going to do right away is that filling the gap, right? Closed-ended questions might be given for the students to complete them blank. So the thing that they are going to do right away is completing the blank, right? For example, if you look at the present perfect tense, you know what? When the teacher is trying to tell them the pattern, the structure for the present perfect tense, that way of grammar teaching approach is deductive. So the teacher tried to tell the students the pattern first, the rule first. In the present perfect tense, has this structure like subject plus have or has plus verb three structure. Then that rule is basically given first, and then what the students do right away is that constructing sentences and trying to use those sentences they did use before for their real-time conversation, really in the classroom, right? So that kind of grammar teaching is, what, deductive with grammar teaching approach, and you know, truly speaking, it benefits nothing for the students to be communicative. That's why. So the way we deliver the grammar is the one that determines the overall performance of the students with regard to speaking, as far as speaking is concerned, right? So that's why we teachers to have a big responsibility to make everything practical there in the classroom. Unless we do that, thinking about fluency in communication is absolutely impossible. So what the teacher has to give due emphasis the way how he is going to deliver the grammar lesson there in the classroom in a very practical way, in an inductive way. Unless you know the students are going to be an expert on grammar, but there comes nothing on their communication. There comes nothing on their speaking capabilities. That's why we Ethiopian teachers, students as well, are poor in communication, because the way we deliver the grammar, the way we learn the grammar is just in a deductive way, and that kind of grammar teaching approach, you know, gives nothing for improving our communication. Right? That's why. So we need to understand from the very beginning. We need to understand what grammar lesson are we going to teach the student there in the classroom, and then we have to try our better way how we can the grammar lesson delivered there in the classroom is too much practical, right? So that's very interesting. So we don't forget to put that concept in the mind always when we are just trying to put everything practical, right? We need to make it feasible. Feasibility is the best thing, right? Unless we are just letting the students to be practical, the students may sit passive there in the classroom, and they may not have the interest, they may not have the passion to do their best in the classroom as far as speaking communication in general is concerned. So we teachers do have a big responsibility. We are too much accountable to do our bit there in the classroom, the way how we can help the students to be much more communicative, right? That's the interesting concept that I have to put in the mind. So let's see the present perfect tense first. The present perfect tense. You know what? The present perfect tense has its own pattern, by the way. It has its own structure, but we don't need to tell them the structure first. Rather, you know, just write some sentence there in the board, and then let the students to have a conversation with their friends by using the sentence or the sentence which are already written there on the board. So that kind of grammar teaching is inductive, and that helps the students to be much interactive, right? Unless you do that, if you are just spending a lot of time on the rule, that brings nothing. It's absolutely impossible to think about perfection as far as communication is concerned if the way we deliver the grammar is deductive in character. So that's why. So you know what? First, we write some sentence as far as present perfect is concerned, right? We write some sentence within the present perfect tense. So she has eaten her lunch. She has lived in London for 5 years. Like kind of sentences are written there on the board, and the students are trying to use those sentences for their everyday, for their practical conversation there in the classroom, right? That's why. So whenever personally, I'm not just a kind of person who is denying the role of grammar for perfect communication, for effective communication, because it plays a big role. It plays a significant role, right? Just to get closer to fluency in the very possible way. So unless we are not good at grammar, your communication will not be effective, because there comes a kind of fragment on your communication unless the grammar is used in the right way there in the kind of conversation you are trying to have with your friends or whomever is, doesn't matter. Even you'll try to have a kind of conversation with your teacher in person. So you need to have the right grammar to make your communication effective, right? Unless the right grammar is used for the kind of speaking, the kind of communication that you are going to have right away. It's not expected it's not expected to convey a complete message. It's not possible to deliver a complete message to with whom you are trying to have a conversation with. That's why we are just expected to do our best the way how we can be good at communication by considering the grammar rules in the mind, right? That's the point. So that's a very interesting point. So we need to make it that we need to have an inductive kind of grammar teaching in the classroom, right? But that kind of trend is not practically used by Ethiopian teachers based on the experience I had, right? Because we teachers are an expert in grammar, as I've already mentioned from the very beginning. Not only teachers, but students are also good at grammar, but they are not good at speaking. Why? Because we teachers deliver the grammar lesson in a didactic way than using the inductive way of grammar teaching approach in a very practical way. So we need to assimilate, right? We need to integrate form, meaning, and the others in a well integrated way. We need to integrate this. We don't need to think about form all the time, right? We need to think about form only. We need to understand the meaning. We need to be implicit, right? An implicit kind of grammar teaching is very, very recommendable, because we need to understand not only the rule, not only the form of the grammar itself, rather we need to imply what the grammar text is all about. We need to have a kind of implication on that. We need to imply what the meaning is, the central meaning, the core meaning of the grammar is all about, right? Unless we do that, what, thinking about perfection is absolutely impossible. That's why we need to stay focused on grammar in an inductive way, right? Because it is a way how we are going to integrate grammar with communication. So we need to use it right through communication. We need to use the right grammar through communication, right? Unless we are just doing that, thinking about perfection as far as communication is concerned is completely beyond the possible. It's absolutely impossible, right? So we need to be inductive, by the way, right? We need to be inductive. We need to be inductive. We need to have the inductive way of grammar teaching. We need to be we need to have an implicit kind of grammar teaching. You know what implicit means, right? We don't need to stay focused on the form, the rule of the grammar, rather the meaning itself, right? We need to understand what the meaning is all about. When you just come to talk about grammar, we need to understand the implicit meaning of the grammar we're practically using for our everyday conversation, right? We need to understand it. That's why. But when you just come to talk about the deductive way of grammar teaching, it basically focuses on the form, not the meaning. But literally, we are expected to integrate. We are expected to blend the two, right? We need to blend the two, the form and and the meaning has to blend one another. Has to be used in an integrated way, in a well collaborative way. That makes our communication better. That makes our communication good, right? So you know what? It's common to see that a lot of people are trying to blame the role of grammar for better communication, but I'm not just on the side of people those who are blaming it because it is the best. It's a premise for better communication. Thinking about it without grammar, thinking about perfection without grammar is completely impossible. Maybe we may make some sort of grammar mistakes to some extent, but an absolute incorrect grammar is completely forbidden to use in our conversation, to use in our communication progress, right? That's why we are just expected to dedicate much of our time the way how we can be good at grammar and how we can be good at communication, right? They have to go together hand in hand, right? They have to go together. Thinking about grammar and thinking about communication, thinking about grammar and trying to use the grammar in our everyday communication, right? That's what a blended way of grammar teaching is about. We need to blend form and meaning together, right? We need to blend the two. We need to integrate one from the other because that's very helpful to level up our communication competency in general, right? So we need to put all these things into the mind as far as you know communication and communication in English language is concerned. And that's we are trying to use all these points that I have mentioned from the very beginning. Thinking about perfection, thinking about fluency is completely impossible, right? So we have to have that kind of mindset. We have to have that kind of principle in the mind, right? If you have those things in mind, it's possible to accomplish everything what we are expected to do so in the progress of language learning, in the journey of language learning, right? Yeah, speaking without correct grammar is not complete by itself, right? It's not complete by itself. If you miss a lot of grammar, there comes a kind of misunderstanding with whom you are trying to have a conversation with. That's where we are just suggested to spend a lot of time the way how we can get closer to perfection in with regard to grammar, right? So we need to have time to think about grammar, and we have to understand the grammar lesson in an inductive way, not in a deductive way. That is very helpful for leveling up our level of competency, for leveling up our communication competency, efficiency as well, right? So we need to use it. For example, you know what the examples that I gave you before, the examples that I told you before, you know, you may have lots of sentences with regard to grammar as far as grammar is concerned. You need to have a lot of sentences constructed by using the present perfect tense, and then you don't need to stay focused. Right? You don't need to take time thinking about the rule, thinking about you know it's the one that comes later. By the way, it's the one that comes later. I'm I'm not just undermining the form of the grammar. We need to understand the form. We need to understand the pattern as well. But constructing sentences and illustrating and trying to use those grammar in communication is the one that priority must be given, right? We need to give priority for that. So in an inductive way of grammar teaching approach, example first kind of rule is there. Example first you need to have the examples. First you need to use those grammar lessons for your communication, for your speaking, for your listening, for your reading, and whatever it is. Rather, so you are expected to be feasible. You are expected to be practical, right? You need to put all these rules into action by practically using those examples in your conversation, right? In your dialogue, in the kind of dialogue you're going to have with your friends, in the kind of conversation, in the kind of discussion you are expected to have in the classroom, right? So you, we need to be technical, by the way. We need to be strategical. Unless we're not in a way to use the right technique, the right strategy for teaching grammar, thinking about perfection as far as speaking is concerned, communication is concerned, is it's not possible by enemies, right? That's why. So there are lots of things that you have to put in the mind of the way how we can be good at communication, right? Grammar is one, vocabulary, pronunciation is another thing, right? We need to rehearse them. We need to practice all these aspects of communication in order to be good at it. Unless we are in a way to practice, unless we are not in a way to put all these things into action, you know, yeah, you know what? It's very difficult to be in a good progress, by the way. It's very challenging to be in a good progress. It doesn't matter whatever challenge we are facing while we are trying to come closer to perfection in communication, right? There might be lot of circumstances that makes to be slow. There are lots of circumstances that does lead us to be in a good progress. So we need to understand what the problem is all about and try to overcome them and just keep going, right? Keep going, practicing in whatever it is, right? That's the thing. That's the thing. So this is, the lesson that I come up with for today. So we took it all a lot about it, and I hope you got something important as far as the grammar teaching approach is concerned. And I hope truly speaking, honestly speaking, now you have the whole you have the energy, you have the courage to put everything into action as a teacher, right? Because unless we are trying our best to make everything practical in the process of language teaching, no, it's not possible to bring perfection. It's not possible to be good at it. Even we're not in a way to help. We're not in a way to scaffold students to be the best version of themselves, right? That's why. So we have to dedicate a lot of time. We have to put a big effort on our progress because that helps the students to be good at speaking. That helps the students to be good at communication. So we need to have the courage inside. We need to have the interest, the passion, and then we need to have the commitment to do everything practical within the classroom. If you are in a way to do that, the students can get closer. The students can be competent enough, right? The students can compete with other students outside of it. So we need to have, you know, we need to have a planned time. We need to have time for doing that. And optimistically, if you have the interest to do that, it's possible to bring about a kind of improvement on the students as well as our performance. Thank you very much for the time you had here in my live stream. Next time I will just come up with another topic and we'll try to talk about it in detail and try to wrap it up in the way we get it. So thank you very much indeed for your participation, your attendance, everybody. Goodbye. Good night.